Thank you so much. Let me introduce Professor. We are today the humble intellectuals assembled over here to celebrate the Gandhi Jayanti, the 2nd October being the birthday of the Gandhi Jayanti, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and also Professor Lal Bahadur Shastri, the Prime Minister of the former Prime Minister of India. And today's topic to which Professor Assadi Saab is going to speak is the reclaiming Gandhi for 21st century. So let me introduce to Professor Assadi Saab. In fact, his 150 biodata has been now compiled. Can you please go to next slide, sir? The 150 page biodata has been concised. We are very sorry, Muzaffar Saab, because we had a very big challenge to compile the entire biodata. We have tried to give the participants the entire information of your profile through the 2 slides. Dr. Muzaffar Hassan Assadi Saab is a professor of Department of Political Science and at the University of Mysore. Assadi Saab was born on 24th August 1961 at Udupi. He completed his BA and MA in Political Science from Mangalore University, MPhil and Ph.D. from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi in the year 1987 and 1992. He completed his postdoc from University of Chicago, US in the year 1997. He has more than 30 years of experience. He has worked as lecturer for Goa University and Mangalore University, and since 1994 to till date, he is working for University of Mysore at various capacities. Presently, he is working as professor in the Department of Political Science. Professor Assadi Saab was also visiting professor or fellow for various universities of the different countries like Russian State University, Al-Taqwan University, Sultanate of Oman, Kerala University, Punjab University, Madras University, etc. In fact, there were many universities. We could able to make it to the concise to highlight a few of the universities over here. Professor Muzaffar Assadi Sahab has vast administrative experience and has served at various capacities as special officer, Board of Studies chairman, Board of Studies member, academic council member for Mysore University. He was also external member, Board of Studies of 22 universities of our country. Next slide. Professor Saab has received various grants for his research work from UGC. He was one of the coordinator for a 50 crore grant sanctioned by the UGC or UP project, that is University Potential for Excellence, received to Mysore University. It's really a proud sir. Professor Muzaffar Assadi Saab was resource person and has delivered lectures in more than 100 conferences. He has published more than 140 papers in various national and international journals. He has authored 13 books, served as editor or co-editor and member in 22 journals, newsletters of national and international repute. Sir has guided successfully 20 PhDs, 13 MPhil and 3 postdoc students. It's a very proud to hear, sir. Professor Muzaffar Assadi received many awards for his services. To name few, the Karnataka Sahitya Academy Award in the year 2011, appreciation from KSGH, that is Music and Performing Arts University, for the contribution towards education in 2011, and Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Millennium Best Teacher Award in the year 2017. In fact, we are fortunate to have such a great personality, wonderful gentleman, and a great human being to be with us to deliver today's talk on the Gandhi Jayanti. And I now invite Professor Muzaffar Assadi Sahab to deliver his lecture on Gandhi Jayanti's today's the day of 2nd October. Sir, welcoming you, sir. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to this group, humble intellectuals, uh, and to deliver a lecture on reclaiming Gandhi for 21st century. In fact, there are two things while titling this particular lecture, whether Gandhi should be reclaimed for 21st century or can he be reclaimed in 21st century? These are the two important questions that we need to pose. Second important thing is, let me begin with your first, since this group, can you call Gandhi as a humble intellectual?
Professor
You
Sam,
know,
can you
uh,
be little louder? Mike, huh?
hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
The there are two important issues that we need to focus on. One is that would you like to reclaim Gandhi for 21st century? If so, why? What are the reasons why we should reclaim Gandhi? Which obviously means that Gandhi either was lost or Gandhi is on the way of, being becoming part of the history. The second question is that whether we need to reclaim Gandhi in 21st century. That means that we need to go into the different issues and try to locate him. Is there Gandhi in 21st century? Before that, when we need to understand. Let me get into this issue of the humble intellectuals. Is Gandhi a humble intellectual? Can you call Gandhi as a humble intellectual? In the sense that if you look at his history, his lifestyle, his arguments, did Gandhi pose as humble intellectuals throughout his career, through his political career? I can't call him as a politician as such because he was beyond politicians. He was a statesman. He was a social activist. He was everything. He was a philosopher. He was an economist. He was in a way, a scientist. In a way, he's a doctor also. If you look at his argument about the pandemic and other things. Can you call him as a humble intellectual because he never accepted that kind of categories that was made about him. For example, like when somebody said you are Mahatma, but in due course he said that his Mahatmaship is worthless. Gandhi once argued that one. Uh, he said that I have become literally sick of the adoration of the unthinking multitude. He was so tired of this kind of adoration, calling him Mahatma, calling him his Bapuji. There are a large number of stories about Gandhi. For example, if you read somebody like some historians trying to develop what is a popular notion about Gandhi in 19 I mean particularly in the Uttar Pradesh and other things. Gandhi was seen as the Messiah, was seen as a prophet, was seen as somebody who can throw away the Britishers with no time. Gandhi would cure the patients. Gandhi would cure the, cancerous patients and other things. Even he would purify the water and other things. There was a certain popular notion that was created, constructed about that one. But if you look at his other argument, there were inconsistencies in the argument. There are certain accusations that have been labeled against him. But at the same time, if you look at his his writings, in fact, it is compiled in. Actually, Gandhi wrote only 3 books plus one. My experiment with the truth, Satyagraha of South Africa, and Hind Swaraj. These are the 3 important texts Gandhi wrote. There's one more text on the health, which in fact, he wrote it when he was in South Africa, particularly at the time of the pandemic. But that was literally compiled later on in 1940 something, somewhere 42, when Gandhi was in Aga Khan Palace. When he was arrested, he was kept there. That time he came out with a book on health issue. If you read all his texts, and there are many things that was compiled later on, like for example, his argument about the agrarian studies, his argument on industrial workers or in the industrial strike, his series of writings in Harijan, his writings in the Indian Opinion, that paper, it was published from the South Africa, or his speeches and other things. If you read all these things, he is not, he doesn't appear like an intellectual. Um, he, he doesn't like a critical intellectual, but there were times when he becomes very critical on certain issues. But his critical position keep changing. Let me take up two important things. Particularly one is talking about the civilization. I'll come back to that one because civilization debate is much more. It's not simple that thing. His debate on the civilization. For example, he was a bit critic about Western civilization and the Western modernity. You might be knowing about that one. But when it comes to the question of civilization, there was a time when some journalist from United Kingdom asked him the question, what do you feel about civilization? He said that that's a good idea. He thought that it's a good idea, not it was a phase of development. It was not a phase of other form of the modernity and other things. He thought that it's a good idea. Then at the end of his life, probably after 1947, between 1947 and 1948, probably he changed his mind. Why I'm trying that Gandhi had inconsistencies in argument. For example, like this particular argument came forward when Yusuf Merali talked about it. Yusuf Merali was one of the bitter critique of the Western civilization. He was a Gandhian to the core. And when he went to United States, he changed his view. He did not speak against what is called the Western civilization. He was not criticizing the Western civilization and its implications. Somebody asked him the question, why are you not talking about, why are you not bit critique about the Western civilization? Then Yusuf Merali said that, see, even Gandhi has said that since Britishers have left, we need to take the best possible things from the Western world, which obviously means that a man who was consistently critical, but ultimately never became a critical, but he becoming a kind of apologist to the Western thinking. For example, the same question asked about the modernity. For example, about the industrialization, industrial technique and other things. He was a bitter critic of the Western technology and other things. He said, I'm not a bitter critic about the Western technology. Look at, for example, Singer sieving machine. I still use that one. I would support that one. At the same time, look at his position on the railways. Railways also, Gandhi was in a way one side. He was a very bitter critic because he was saying in that text, particularly Hind Swaraj, Gandhi was saying that the railways is railway is the one instrument which is carrying this pandemic, and also it is railways which are literally expanding the colonial power in Indian context. But at the same time, he made use of this technology. He made use of this new what's called the railways for his benefit. I mean, in that sense, there is no consistency in Gandhi's argument. Take the case of his argument about the state. Gandhi would say that Gandhi definitely would become what is called the enlightened anarchist. He was not an abstract anarchist. Gandhi was definitely an enlightened anarchist. If you look at other issues also, Gandhi had no... Hello? Gandhi, I mean, in that sense, he was not consistent in the argument, whether about the war, about, I mean, in a way, there was an argument saying that Gandhi was not completely opposed to the war itself, but he was, believed in the limited war kind of thing. But how do you look at, I mean, there are other kinds of stereotypes about Gandhi also. There are the South Africans, they are accusing Gandhi as the racist, saying that Gandhi quite often used the term called the kafirs. He was a kafir particularly using the word kafir to the South Africans. That's the reason why it is said that while Gandhi went to South Africa, he went as a racist, and he came out as a racist. Again, I mean, because that this argument of racism was identified in his collected works of Mahatma Gandhi and other books also, particularly the collected works of the Mahatma Gandhi. For example, in one case it was said that um, in one of his writings, particularly in the Gandhi's collection of works, collected volumes, that's an 88 volume, there's one particular sentence that is quite often used. Um, it was said that, let me quote that one. It was a gross injustice to seek to place Indians in the same class as the Kafirs. The very word term kafir was nothing but condemning. Kafir was nothing but creating a category called the others. Kafir was nothing but a person who is black, who is uncivilized, who is unmodern and other things. In fact, that was again and again reproduced in many of his argument when he was in South Africa. And that's the reason why it is said that he was a racist. He came as a racist. But at the same time, one needs to understand that Gandhi was a failed man, failed man. But why I'm trying to say that this thing, a failed man, miserably failed, a man with the contradictions, a man with the, simple thinking and other things, how he became a great man, how he became, everlasting man. There is one argument saying that if you are trying to leave Gandhi, Gandhi will not leave you. Gandhi is entrenched in your life. Gandhi has become, he has conquered your mind. Gandhi, that's the reason why Gandhi once said, that you need to decolonize your mind. It was the Britishers who have colonized your mind. But that time has come to decolonize decolonize from the, our mind from the Western notions and the Western development as such. Now, even if you try to, give up Gandhi, probably Gandhi will not give up because he is a part of this thing. Because that the kind of strategies that Gandhi used, the values that Gandhi imbibed, and the politics that he used, probably that becomes a part of our life. That's the reason I'm trying to say that, look at Gandhi, one side known as an average man. Gandhi agreed this particular position. In fact, he said once that I'm a average man. I'm to be no more than an average man with less than average ability. Gandhi agreed to this particular position. That's a strange position, but one is to appreciate this kind of introspection that the Gandhi did. In fact, the introspection is a fundamental thing in Gandhi. To tell you, to tell it precisely, because that if when he goes to upas, I mean satyagraha and other things, when he was resorting to satyagraha or fast unto death kind of thing, probably that was the time when Gandhi is undergoing this kind of introspection. What was the problem with the politics? What is the problem with the things and other things? And that's the reason why Gandhi, one of the important component is the introspection, which he always would resorted to at the time of the, satyagraha, or no, sorry, so when resorting to the fasting. And Gandhi would say definitely, because this is the, in a way, Gandhi is here constitute. I mean, he would represent a kind of humbleness, but can he be called as a humble intellectual? That's the main problem that we need to probe into. So one side he says that I'm an average man with less than average ability, and also he agrees to the fact that his mathematship is worthless. He agrees to certain things, for example, like his failure in his politics also. For example, like two things. If we read the last phase of Gandhi, parallels writings on Gandhi, particularly a large last phase, and 5 volumes. If you read carefully in that text, uh, he quotes, parallel quotes Gandhi saying that he doesn't want to live anymore. There are 5 times I have come across, 5 times Gandhi expressed that he is no more a man to be considered by the political parties or the politicians like Nehru. He felt that he became a spent force in Indian context for Nehru, for Patel, or even for the Congress, or even for the um, uh, Jinnah and others. That's the reason why, in one side, he was also arguing that Congress should be, disbanded immediately after the independence, saying that it should be, converted into voluntary organizations and other things. But at the same time, here this introspection, why he failed. What is the reason that his politics has not reached out to the people? And Gandhi was also, again, he was critical about himself. Reasons for his failure, understanding the reasons why people are not consulting him, why he has become a spent force and other things. That's the reason why one side, even for example, like when it comes to the question of the Pakistan partition of India, Gandhi felt that he was either betrayed or he was not taken into confidence and other things. So that's the reason why one find Gandhi, felt that he was a failed man. He was an average man. At the same time, Gandhi was inconsistent man. But at the same time, he was a frustrated, disappointed man. I would call him as a man of contradictions also. No, you have got multiple, characteristics. In that context, was Gandhi be reduced to a single person? Or Gandhi can be called as a man of simple principles, or Gandhi can Gandhi be called as a man with a consistent argument and other things. My argument is that there is no single Gandhi. If you carefully read Gandhi and the kind of influence that Gandhi had on the politics of the globe, even in his lifetime itself, Gandhi became, imagined man itself. People start imagining himself, and Gandhi's influence cut across the boundaries of the nation. Even influence was felt even in America, United States, when American blacks they came and visited Gandhi to find out the tactics that he has to employ uh, in the context of racial discrimination in Africa, America, particularly Howard and Thomas. They came and they were called as the Negroes, whatever it may be, but they came down to India, talked to Gandhi, and discussed with Gandhi and tried to employ the same tactics that Gandhi used. Well, I'm trying to say that, look at, during his time itself, there were groups in different parts of the world who emulated Gandhi, who tried to, reflect upon the Gandhian politics as such. For example, like the pacifists in the United States, they looked at Gandhi. There were, in 1950s, 1948, 50 itself, immediately after this Second World War, there are groups, particularly the group called the anti-nuclear groups, looked at Gandhi for the world peace. There are groups who talked about the war, and the way Gandhi confronted Hitler. In fact, Gandhi wrote letters to Hitler, a man who was known as a fascist. And that was a daring nature of Gandhi to write uh, uh, Hitler, because that Gandhi uh, major reason why Gandhi could able to write a letter to a fascist was the fact that Gandhi had that morality, Gandhi had the conviction, Gandhi had the belief, Gandhi had the commitment. So he thought that the only way of confronting his Hitler is by way of uh, by way of the ahimsa. Ahimsa is non-violence itself. Confronting him. This is the same tactics Gandhi advocated even in the context of Kashmir, post 1947, when Pakistan forces entered into India. And Gandhi advocated that we should resort to this non-violence kind of thing. And Gandhi had this kind of conviction at the global level also. I mean, that conviction made, this is called the moral conviction. It's not a simple conviction, it's a moral conviction. And that conviction was embedded in the politics of the satyagraha. That conviction was embedded in the, was the truth. I would say that this moral conviction was basically embedded in the non-violence itself. Non-violence, he believed that the non-violence will triumph today or the tomorrow. That's the reason why pacifists or the peace activists would say that no, Gandhi would definitely be required in this particular context when you have this different kinds of struggles, different kind of conflict taking place at the global level. Look at what I'm trying to say, that look at Gandhi, there are multiple Gandhis. There is no single Gandhi as such. Why I'm trying to say that, suddenly after the death of Gandhi, either Gandhi has been appropriated or Gandhi has been, become part of the different social movements and other things, or the social movements. I would say that there are four ways of looking at Gandhi. One is the Gandhi of the state. Gandhi of the state, Gandhi of the international institutions. The second is the Gandhi of the social movements. Gandhi of the social movements. The third is the Gandhi of the unknown. The third is the fourth is the Gandhi of the masses. If you look at these four important categories, probably you'll find out that Gandhi cannot be reduced to a single person. Gandhi cannot be reduced to one particular country. He goes beyond countries. His influence was beyond India, beyond the subcontinent, beyond the caste and class. That's the reason why it is argued that Gandhi defended the what is called the religious harmony and the religious kind of religious syncretism. Gandhi tried to bring in this religious syncretism. Look at this Dun, Ram Dun, wherein he says that Sabuko de Bhagwan, that Ram Dun, wherein you have this he tries to combine the Islam on the Christianity. I mean, in fact, there are different religions that influenced Gandhi also, whether the Christianity, Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, because basically he was a Sanatana Hindu in a way, but at the same time his Vaishnavism deeply influenced him. That's the reason why he became a pure vegetarian and became non-violent in that sense also. And at the same time, there are other categories that also influenced him. World leaders, world scholars, or the world, intellectuals also influenced Gandhi. Like, for example, Thoreau or Ruskin or Tolstoy, they all influenced Gandhi at the global level. And their experiment, for example, Leo Tolstoy's experiment, which became a part of his experiment in South Africa, and even I think the shoemaker's argument. All these things that influenced Gandhi also, whatever it may be. Gandhi, in one way, he was he is representing the different attitude, different. I mean, Gandhi became an important factor for different categories. Let me look at one is the Gandhi of the state. Why I'm trying to say that the states, some of the states have resorted to what's it called, Gandhian philosophy. Like, for example, post-independence period, if you look at, you might be surprised to look at this particular person, Ho Chi Minh. Is the father of the Vietnam Revolution. He was a communist, hardcore communist, and he never believed in the non-violence. I mean, sorry, believed in the non-violence as such. Once he made a reference, Ho Chi Minh as a communist, as a man who brought who fought against the American forces post 60s, and he says that. If I'm right, he said, I and others may be revolutionaries, but we are the disciples of Mahatma Gandhi, directly or indirectly. Nothing more, nothing less. Can you imagine a person like Ho Chi Minh is saying that Gandhi was an inspiring category, inspiring to these revolutionaries. This is not simply Ho Chi Minh alone. If you look at different scholars, uh, uh, I mean, who have been influenced by the Gandhi. That's the reason why there are two. I mean, here you have to understand that there are two categories who have been influenced by Gandhi. One is that who are closely associated with the Gandhi. Meanwhile, one is to understand that the state has appropriated Gandhi. For Gandhi, for the state, Gandhi is an essential component. For example, like the state like India, Gandhi is an important category, and because state has to. This is borrowed from the Gandhian itself, where the Gandhi's argument about the means and ends are being used here. He says that the means should justify the ends. Ends is the what kind of politics that you require. If you require this is a debate that Gandhi had with the revolutionists when he was in London, I think with the Vinayak Godse also, sorry, Veer Savarkar and others, that whether it was to take up the revolutionary method or the violent method. One has to keep in mind that the Gandhi was opposed to the violent method. That's the reason why Chauri Chaura incident, immediately after the Chauri Chaura incident, where the police were killed, murdered, Gandhi, what's called cancelled is satyagraha. Gandhi, withdrew the satyagraha, the no cooperation as such. And if you look at the debate that went on between the revolutionaries, Indian revolutionaries, and Gandhi, where revolutionary would demand for what is called the revolutionary methods or the violent method. Gandhi would say that no, I don't believe in that. Even Gandhi made one point clear that I'll not deviate from my principle of non-violence. Even spelling, I'll not. I mean, even at any cost, I'll not. Even if I die, also I'll not give up this non-violence as my core principle. That Gandhi stood to that one. See, the whole question is that here, then you have this whole debate taking place. What kind of the state, the political system that you need to develop? You need to have a violent state, a powerful state, or you want to have a state which believes in the non-violence or not. So Gandhi would say that if you use this non-violence as a strategy, then obviously you'll have a state which is non-violent, and that's the reason why Gandhi would argue about the means justifying the ends. Ends is the goal, and means is the strategy that Gandhi employed, and that's the reason why for the that's the reason Indian state become a soft non-violent state also. If you look at the way Indian state was constructed, and the Gandhi also believed that the state power should be minimized, or the state should not be um the main goal of any politics as such. That's the reason why in a way he has been accused of being anarchist, but at the same time I would say that Gandhi would be Gandhi can be construed as the enlightened anarchist rather than a simple anarchist. The anarchist would not agree to agree to the state itself, but here Gandhi would believe in the minimal state, but at the same time Gandhi would believe in what's called the power to the common man. That's the reason why in the present context Gandhi becomes an essential component, because 21st century, particularly because Gandhi would empower the people. Particularly the voiceless, through the Gram Swaraj, through his argument about the last man should be the part of the politics. Last man should be the part of the political power, political structure. That becomes an important component. I think that argument, decentralization argument, deconcentration of the argument is being taken over by the World Bank also in recent years. That's the reason why Gandhi becomes an important component for the state. One side is that Gandhi, the state wants to appropriate Gandhi to justify his actions. The second is that the state wants the legitimacy which can be provided, which can be derived from the Gandhian concept of Gandhian concept, many concepts. The third is that state want Gandhi to perpetuate his control over the people, because that by virtue of the fact that Gandhi addressed the issues of the common man, particularly the backward caste, Dalits, the peasantry, and others. So obviously, the state has to recognize the presence of this particular caste and communities. Gandhi did it. And that's the reason why there is a nexus between the state and the Gandhi. So Gandhi becomes a part of your text. Gandhi becomes a part of your books. And that Gandhi becomes a part of your knowledge system. And the Gandhi becomes a part of your state power as such. And that's the reason why everywhere you find the Gandhian, what's called the photos. The second important thing is that the people who have heard Gandhi but failed to meet him. Like one example would be, and at the same time, there are people who are very associated with Gandhi who later on, spread the message of Gandhi. Like for example, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and who was known as the Frontier Gandhi, and others, for example, who heard him, tried to touch him, but failed to meet him. For example, like the Martin Luther King, who wanted to come down to India to meet Gandhi, discuss with him, but it could not be materialized. I mean, he talked about Gandhi. I mean, he said that he tried to identify Gandhi with, Jesus, saying that whatever the Jesus said, whatever the uh, Jesus stood for, Gandhi also stood for the similar kind of thing. That's the reason why Martin Luther King tried to emulate Gandhi, tried to use that one against the racism, against the racial policies of the United States, and tried to bring Gandhi into the consciousness of the blacks and the masses in the United States and the African continent. I'm sorry, and the American continent as such. You look at the third person where Gandhi, he did not meet Gandhi, but Gandhi became a person for a person for long drawn struggle, like the Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela never saw Gandhi, never met Gandhi, but given the fact that he was arrested, he was put behind the bar for nearly 27 years. Probably during this period, he was matured enough to emulate Gandhi. And in fact, he was a revolutionary. He was he believed in this violent revolution earlier. But later on, as he grew old, probably Nelson Mandela became, diluted. I mean, he diluted his political strategy and began to appreciate Gandhi and others because, and that is reflected in his politics also. Like, for example, post apartheid period, Nelson Mandela appointed a commission called the Reconciliation Committee between the blacks and the non-blacks, particularly whites, and that was mainly to heal the historical injustice or heal the memories of the violence. So Gandhi was very much there in Mandela. Or take the case of Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama was also a world leader who believed in the peaceful struggle. Like, for example, the way he came out, he came to India after Chinese forces attacked, captured the Tibet and other things. Probably it's Gandhi is not simple there only. I mean, it is not with the Mandela. It's not with the Martin Luther King, but also with the Bernard Shaw. Or most important thing is that I would say that he's with. You can look at Gandhi even with Yusuf Malala. Probably it might be very strange to us, but it's true. When she was delivering her first lecture, first address to United Nations, she said that you might be knowing about the fact that Malala was the one who confronted the Taliban groups in Pakistan, and particularly she was defending the right of the child girl to education, for education and other things, and they shot her. But fortunately, she survived. And finally, when she was awarded the Nobel, and she was invited to deliver an lecture, or what is it called, her address to the United Nations, wherein she said clearly stating that Gandhi was the one who influenced me. what influenced her? This is one question which literally borrowed from Gandhi. Gandhi, when he was saying about the ahimsa, ahimsa is not the submission. Gandhi always says that what's called the non-violence doesn't mean that you are submitting yourself. Ahimsa is a moral force. Not only that, but also it's a force to confront your enemy with the strength. So it is not a meek submission. For example, when Malala confronted these Taliban, it was not a meek, she was meekly submitting uh, herself before the terrorist forces or the radical forces. She had a conviction. That conviction made her to confront them. That's the reason why she could able to raise a voice for the people of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And you have others also in this particular category who looked at Gandhi, but who never touched Gandhi. It is a second category I'm talking about. But they used Gandhi. I mean, they had the influence of Gandhi. They heard about him. Like, for example, you got the Lake Walesa. Probably you might be knowing about him. He was the leader of the Solidarity group in Poland just before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Uh, um, and when he was organizing the Solidarities group, working class group, probably he was also saying that the Gandhi was the most inspiring personality for him. There are others also, like for example, Václav Havel. He is again considered to be one person who could able to challenge the communist regime in the European continent. But in the present context, there are others also, probably like Chavez. Chavez probably might be knowing about him, the leader of the Venezuela, who introduced the what's called the trade union councils, who introduced socialism and other things. He definitely said about Gandhi, saying that what is that? Gandhi was the one who cannot be questioned, who literally has influenced us and other things. That's the reason why you have got uh, 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 what's that called? Chavez as being a socialist, being a Marxist. Fortunately, Gandhi was not influenced, had no influence over the other revolutionaries in the context of Latin America, like the Fidel Castro or Che Guevara. But here he's a socialist. There are two socialists. One is the Ho Chi Minh, and you have got the Chavez, being influenced by the Gandhi. Why Gandhi became important? Even though the both are revolutionaries, but Chavez is more believed in the parliamentary kind of thing because he contested the election. He believed in the consolidation of the what's called the trade union workers or the trade councils, establishing the trade councils and other things. He believed in the participatory. In fact, when he was talking about the participatory democracy, I mean, he believed that the more the participatory, more would be the democratic structure, the structure becoming more and more extended or more and more expanded. Chavez literally borrowed this argument from Gandhi. Remember that Gandhi is saying that when he was talking about the Panchayati Raj, for Gandhi, decentralization and the Panchayati Raj is the most important, where the pyramid of power is lopsided down. Where the power comes from from the grassroots to the top level, but where the participation for Gandhi becomes an important component for strengthening the democracy, where it was participation becomes the most important for recognizing the people. And Gandhi believed that the common man would be recognized through the decentralization of power, or common man would be recognized through the means of these structures, decentralized structures and other things. Chavez brought this idea of participation, what is called today we talk about what's called the deliberate democracy, largely from the Gandhian notion, which was later on, accepted and which was picked up by the UN also. And that's the reason why you got the second category where Gandhi is not directly touched, but he has been, was or talked about. He has been analyzed. He has been experimented with and tried to develop a new argument. But interestingly, there are times when the states have adopted the argument of Gandhi with regard to the land reforms also. You know, if you read Gandhi carefully, there is one question: was Gandhi a socialist? If there are two or three contexts wherein Gandhi, three places where Gandhi picked up the case of the peasantry. But particularly Champaran, Badoli, and Kheda, Gandhi took it up, and that is a kind of victory. And also, he took up the case of the tribals also through what's called the forest satyagraha in different parts of India, where Gandhi picked up the issues of politics, I mean, issues of this peasantry, particularly remissions at the time of the distress, or the tax, payment of the taxes, high exorbitant rate of the, rents and other things. Gandhi succeeded in that particular aspect. But the question is that, did Gandhi, there are two arguments. One argument is that to what level Gandhian argument has been taken up by the different, states or the different people with regard to the land reforms. One side, in one of his texts, Gandhi says that Sabi Bhumi Gopal ki, which obviously means that land doesn't belong to anybody other than the tiller. So, which obviously mean that Gandhi was a kind of socialist, wherein he tries to say that it should be, divided. It should go to the real tenants or the real tillers. And that's the reason why, I mean, this is one reason why one has to look at the way Firespur Congress of 1937 adopted a resolution in favor of the tenants. There are two influences. One, the Nehruvian influence was very much apparent, and the second is the Gandhian influence also. Gandhi believed in two important things. One is the cooperative life. Um, the second one is a cooperative life that Gandhi talked about. The second is he talked about the trusteeship, even in the context of the land reforms. There's one question whether this can be applied anywhere. Gandhian mode was adopted in Indian context post-independence period, particularly in after first 5-year plan and other things. But it was a colossal failure, whatever it may be. But if you look at the other world, there was attempt to bring the land reforms, but in this particular context, I have a doubt, because there are two ways of land reforms that are introduced at the global level. Because why I'm trying to bring that particular issue is that the land constitute the primary issue in many of the ethnic conflict, many of the tribal conflict, or the many of the countries, whether it's a Mexico, where the argument of the indigenous population to have hold over the natural resources or hold over the common property, etc., or the argument of the Chiapas in the context of the Chile, or in the context of the Latin America, again brings back to the question of whether the land should be distributed after the violent revolution or a peaceful means. Chavez did it, or Belarus, I think the Belarus or somebody else, and Bolivia and others, they did it through the peaceful means. But quite obvious that if they try to, nationalize this property, like the case of the Chile, Allende in the context of the Chile, he was massacred by the American forces. I would say that in the sphere of land reforms, in the sphere of the land issues, Gandhi's influence is much less. But in the context of in the area of natural resources, or what is called the global common, probably Gandhi's influence is much more. Why Gandhi is trying to say that, Gandhi would say that these property, this natural resources, whether water, the air, and forest, and all these things, they should belong to the community. It should not belong to any individual or the multinational corporation. In this particular context, probably we need to bring, two important arguments. One is that Gandhi's advocacy with regard to the global common. And that global common argument of the global common is now, becoming a major issue at the global level, where everybody is now saying that we should preserve this climate because it's a common property. If you don't, what's called preserve this climate, probably the world will vanish within 20 years or 30 years, because you'll have the climate effect on the greenhouse effect on the climate, and subsequently will have the vanishing of this earth. So in that particular context, Gandhi's argument of the global common becomes an important. It has been an important thing is that we need to understand why Gandhi becomes important in the present context. Um, Probably here you find the third way of looking at Gandhi. See, one is that Gandhi is the popular among the new social movements at the global level. And Gandhi is also popular among the critique of globalization. And that's the reason why Gandhi needs to be reclaimed in this particular context. The third is that Gandhi is very popular among the critique of the modernity, the project that the West is advocating. Here, the one question one can ask: did Gandhi talk about the dialogue among the civilization? Or third important argument is that Gandhi's critique on the civilization itself. But here, that same question one can ask whether Gandhi was talking about the dialogue among the civilization. Referring back to my earlier argument. In fact, if you look at three important things, one is that Gandhi is icon of this new social movement at the global level, because they are trying to reclaim Gandhi for the simple reason that in the present day context, particularly after the arrival of the globalization, two things is happening. Two or three things are happening. One is that the globalization is erasing the identities of the large number of population. The second is important thing is that globalization is connecting the local population with the global capital and try to dislocate the local population from their locality, and creating conditions for what is called the deep cultural crisis. Third important thing is that it is globalization is literally killing population. I mean, where the thousands and thousands of people are killing themselves or committing suicide. For example, the case of the farmers. Or the fourth important thing is that globalization is creating a new, it's basically a higher stage of capitalism, which ultimately destroying the community life, the individual autonomy, individual identities, and different social practices and other things. And it is hegemonizing again and again, hegemonizing. Probably here the anti-globalization critique, where you have the social movements, participating and taking up the case, and for them, Gandhi becomes an important icon for the simple reason that Gandhi criticized this model of development. Gandhi criticized the method of acquiring capital. Gandhi criticized the Western philosophy of controlling third world through the means of the capital. Let me take up his text, one of his best known book, that's a Hind Swaraj. That has become the Bible for the new social movement. They are trying to reclaim. In fact, up till 1980, 1970, the large number of universities in the United States and the Western world were not knowing Gandhi's Hind Swaraj, Gandhi's write-up, which he wrote in 1909, when he was traveling from United Kingdom to India. First time he wrote that book it's a very small book, but he wrote it while traveling. No, initially it was written in Gujarat, then later on it was translated in English, that Hind Swaraj, and that book was banned. The reason was that Gandhi called the British Parliament as prostitute, and they did not change that word, despite the fact that British tried to employ this Sedition Act on him. Whatever it may be, that text is becoming important. you don't require to read the whole text. There are two arguments, particularly about the one is the issues about the civilization, and there is on the modernity. Well, I'm trying to argue that the this debate again has come into picture in the context of the pandemic also. I'll come back to that. What is the position of Gandhi on the pandemic? Because Gandhi was also concerned about the way the pandemic started in the South Africa, and his experiment even in the context of India also. His text was important for two or three reasons. One is that he was criticizing, or he is making literally a critique of the Western civilization, thinking that he arguing that the Western civilization is the reason for the downfall of the third world countries or the developing country. For him, it is not the Englishmen who are responsible. It is the English tongue, the idea of English, idea of superiority, where the English tongue is representing the idea of superiority, idea of domination, the idea of hegemony. So that is most important. That is the destroying. Seeing that the Western civilization is more important, most important, and that Western civilization is the most superior civilization. And that's the reason why that was a project later on the Britishers also employed in the context of India, arguing that justified their rule in Indian context, saying that we are trying to civilize the uncivilized Indian, barbaric Indian. And that was later on, entered into a huge debate at the global level with the two scholars interacting. Probably they also came to the argument of Gandhi. For example, like the Huntington, who wrote a book on the clash of civilization, and then Edward Said, his book on the Orientalism. So Edward Said book was about understanding the third world from the prism of the West, how they constructed, how they viewed the third world in terms of the civilization. I mean, how they looked at the civilization as bad, or the backward, or the most unmodern, and the kind of stereotypes that they created about the Indian civilization or the Arab civilization. Then you have this argument of the Huntington later on, who tries to project the Western civilization as the superior, which try to say that in the future case, you have two civilizations clashing with each other. For example, between the Western civilization, Anglo-Saxon one side, and the Islamic civilization on the other hand. But where do you look at this Gandhi in this between? One can look at the Gandhi as a critique of the Western civilization, because it is also deploying its trajectories, different trajectories, whether the technology, whether it employs the institutions, establishment of the institutions, or the text and knowledge system, or the instruments like the doctors, or railways, postal, and all these things. They are the instrument of the Western civilization. They are trying to hegemonize it. They are trying to dominate the third world country. And that's the reason why Gandhi says that we need to have a break with the Western civilization. And I try to try to develop our own civilization, which he calls the Hind Swaraj. The Swaraj is the complete freedom from within, complete freedom without any kind of dependence on the West. The second argument is that Western, particularly the modernity argument, Gandhi's critique on the Western modernity. One thing, I mean, where these kind of arguments are overlapping, but largely his argument is that Western modernity is basically consumerist modernity, which is basically, try to acquire more and more profit and try to be dehumanized. He says that Western modernity is dehumanized to modernity, and that's the reason why this to rehumanize this modernity, one has to talk about the alternatives. That's the reason why we talk about the Gandhian modernity also. I would say that Gandhian modernity worked as a parallel to, or as alternative to, the Western modernity, where Gandhian modernity represent the what's called the truth. Gandhian modernity represented the ahimsa. Gandhian modernity represented the satyagraha and other things. And that modernity has, in that case, Gandhi is not outdated. He's not an obsolete category. In fact, one of his disciples, the post-independence disciple, I would call him as a post-Gandhian Gandhi, Gene Sharp, probably you may not have heard about him. Gene Sharp a scholar, intellectual living in the United States. You know, he came out with the argument that the post-Gandhi doesn't mean the end of Gandhi. Post-Gandhi doesn't mean the complete death of Gandhi, and Gandhi as an idea. Gandhi not as an individual. Gandhi as an idea. His ideas are still relevant. In fact, he says that the Gandhian ideas have influenced many revolution in the present context. In fact, Gene Sharp, who tried to rebuild Gandhi, who tried to rework on Gandhi, his book have influenced some of the revolutions, such as the case of Arab Spring, particularly in the Tunisia and other things. You have this pink revolution taking place, orange revolution taking place, whether it's in the context of the uh, Central Asia. You have got different tulip revolution taking place. There are different kinds of revolution taking place, and this revolution came, adopted the peaceful means. They adopted non-violent means of Gandhi, including the fact that it influenced the Marcos downfall of the Marcos government in the case of the Philippines. It also what's it called, the influenced the case of the Kosovo, where Ibrahim adopted Gandhian tactics of non-violence and tried to topple the government. That's the reason why Gandhian influence is mediated through different social movements, and particularly, and also the writers like Gene Sharp. But at the same time, Gene Sharp also says that Gandhi, post-Gandhi, has created a huge number of new tactics that has to be employed vis-a-vis the authoritarian regimes or the dictatorial regimes. For example, Gene Sharp comes out with not less than 198 strategies of post-Gandhi, like Munna Bhai movie. You might be knowing about that one. That was literally a Gandhian one. Deroping yourself, giving up one by one to the political structure, and making it to be ashamed about yourself, or not paying, withdrawing the taxes to the state. That's an old one. You've got new strategies now employed, like for example, in the case of the Narmada Bachao Andolan, which is inspired by the Gandhi, or you have this Chipko movement, which is inspired by the Gandhi, or Apiko movement in Karnataka, which is also inspired by the Gandhi, where they resorted to hug the tree. They also resorted to drawn in the river belt, river, or like the peasant movement, farmers movement in Karnataka. They resorted to the strategy of laughing before the assembly, or clapping, not ganti bajao, like clapping and other things before the parliament, before the assembly, or taking a donkey's ride, like Vatal Nagaraj is doing it in Karnataka and other things. These are the post-Gandhian strategies that have been employed. And that's the reason why Gandhi becomes the most relevant. And the most important thing is that now two things are happening. One is in the global context. One is the accumulation of political power. We need to have a political strategy. That's the reason why yeah, we have far right movement emerging in the context of the European continent, or you have this liberal fascism emerging in the context of United States, where Trump is saying that America meant for the Americans, America first, and other things in different parts. You have this authoritarian dictatorial regimes are emerging in the present context, this and that's the reason why Gandhi is required here, because that Gandhi needs to Gandhi's strategy is essential to contain them, or topple them, or replace them. The second important thing is that the democracy is in a very, very fragile mood in the present context, and that's the reason why we need to go back to Gandhi again, because to strengthen the participation, to create spaces for the liberal democracy to expand, and to create required spaces at the global level, we need to have Gandhian mode. The third important thing is the way the natural resources, where the different resources are being appropriated by the global capital. Probably Gandhi is required, and that's the reason why we need to protect the global commons. Most important thing is that Gandhi becomes relevant in the context of the pandemic. See, pandemic gives us two important narratives. One important narrative is the way the capitalist countries have collapsed. Um, One, particularly United States or including India, where the GDP rate has gone down to 20 minus 23.8 something, where the American economy has collapsed. Which obviously mean that uh, there are two things in this particular context. One is that one argument is that capitalism has collapsed. Sorry, capitalist market has collapsed. Capitalism has not collapsed. As an ideology, it has not collapsed. Capitalism continues to rule, continues to dominate. Probably here Gandhi becomes a most important component, because that this is the reflection of what's called the capitalism's uneven growth. I mean, it's a uncontrolled rule, controlled growth that has created this condition of the crisis. So why Gandhi requires in this particular context is that Gandhi would believe in taming the capitalism. Gandhi would believe in taming the global market. Gandhi would believe in taming this, what's called the authoritarian regimes. From the, if Gandhi, we need to have the Gandhi again to read Gandhi, because, if we read Gandhi or to adopt his strategies, probably we can tame the global capital, and we can tame the Western world. The third important thing is that Gandhi becomes important in the pandemic situation, because Gandhi believed that the pandemic is largely he doesn't say directly, but he definitely says that the pandemic also has given rise to what is called alternatives to us. For example, he says that the pandemic, particularly when he was involved in the pandemic work in South Africa, between, I mean, particularly 1904 and post Africa, particularly in the context of Gujarat. Gujarat, he comes back because he was a failed lawyer also in Gujarat. Uh, but in Gujarat, I mean, in this two particular thing, he wrote series of article in Indian Opinion newspaper, which was published from the South Africa, where Gandhi would say that pandemic requires alternative lifestyle. That's the reason why Gandhi becomes important for us in this particular context in the 21st century, where he says that our food habits has to be changed. One, he says that you need to, follow this what is called the not the satyagraha fast. Fasting should be observed. He should say that we should eat limited food and other things. That's one thing that Gandhi talked about. The second is that Gandhi also, particularly in his book on the health, which is basically compiled articles during during the time of the pandemic. Gandhi says that we need to use what's called the different therapies, particularly therapy from the earth therapy, where he says that we should use the earth as a therapy against Western medicine and other things. Gandhi succeeded, interestingly, interestingly, Gandhi succeeded in this therapy. Why I'm trying to say that probably in this pandemic situation, the 21st century, where you have this, what is a colossal exploitation of the world by the Western capitalists, Gandhi requests, because I mean, we need to retrieve his Hinswaraj, we need to retrieve his debate on Western modernity and the capitalism. Second, Gandhi needs to be retrieved for the way the dictatorial or the liberal fascism emerging at the global level, who are trying to suppress the identity, who are trying to eliminate different communities and other things. Gandhi needs to be retrieved through Malala, as Malala has argued that we should, for me, the Gandhi is the most influential character. Gandhi should be, retrieved through Malala, or Gandhi should be retrieved through what's it called, Gene Sharp, or Gandhi should be retrieved from Bernard Shaw and other things. Whatever about Shevas is no more, whatever it may be. Gandhi needs to be retrieved in this particular context. Otherwise, what happens is that there is a possibility that Gandhi, this world will, will collapse within a couple of years, because one is that the capitalism will definitely destroy our ecology. Capitalism will destroy our life. Capitalism will definitely destroy our community identities and other things. To tame the capitalism, to tame this world, to deepen this democracy, to expand this democracy, and to retain our identities as social categories, to retain our identity as distinct social categories, we need to retrieve Gandhi. I think that Gandhi, even though is being accused of many things as an average man, Gandhi has been, accused that he was a racist. He was not an intellectual. He's an inconsistent. He was a contradictory man and other things. But definitely, we require to have a Gandhi, not as an individual, but as an idea, but as a philosophy, as a thinker, but as well as the social, thinker, social, philosopher as such. Thank you very much.